What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. We are fully into the college football season, and there were some big storylines from week 2. One that we didn't expect to happen. Another one was a game that there were big stakes for, Texas against Michigan. I'm going to talk about that, but of course, I'm going to get things started with the upset. But before I get into that, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Starting things out, though, it was a huge day for the Northern Illinois Huskies. They pulled off the massive upset at number 5 Notre Dame. And this was a case of the Notre Dame offense being practically non-existent. They were held to just 286 total yards. Riley Leonard threw a couple of interceptions. It's another big letdown for the Fighting Irish. I think a couple of years ago now, they had that loss to Marshall. In this case, for me, it's another instance of falling into the Notre Dame trap. I mean, after the way they went into College Station and were able to get a win over what I think is a good Aggies team, I was really high on the Fighting Irish, and I think a lot of people were. I'm not alone in falling into that trap again, but it seems like when those expectations get raised up in really for the last several decades for this Notre Dame team, they just collapse when those expectations start to get higher. So big loss for Notre Dame. I think they're really going to have to figure out their offense. Is Riley Leonard the guy? He didn't look like it in this week 2 game against NIU. And at this point, it's going to be hard to change things up at quarterback. So maybe do they go a little bit more on the ground game and try to get that established? Does Riley Leonard kind of get more into the flow of things? That's a question now for them to answer. And they have no gimme this next week. They go into West Lafayette to face the Purdue Boilermakers, which I think is no automatic win for the Fighting Irish. I think they opened up as maybe like 12-point favorites in that game. But they are going to have to bring their A game a week after a big loss at home, a real upset loss. Going into the game, this is a huge win for the Huskies. They were 0-14, I think, against AP top 25 ranked teams or maybe top 10. And so they get their first win over a top 10 team in their program's history. I mean, it's a huge win for this program. They also enter the top 25. I'll pull up here when last time was they were in the top 25. I know they had some good years in the early 2010s, so that might have been last time. Maybe it's been a while. Great win for the Huskies. The Irish stay in the top 25 at number 18. I think they should drop further than that, but that's where they're at right now. They still have that win over Texas A&M on the road, so they'll have that when it comes around to potential playoff discussions. But if they play like they did, they're going to have a lot more than just one loss on their ledger going in. On kind of a similar note, I'm going to go into a second point that was going to be a little bit later, but this was a week 2 of escaping for top 25 teams. Penn State escapes with a narrow win over Bowling Green. They were also at home for their game. Oregon, I think there's a little bit more merit to this one. They won on a last-second field goal over Boise State. I think that was expected. I mean, I know the spread was like 17.5, but I thought that they would win by a touchdown. It ends up being a little bit even closer than that. They were down by a touchdown to the Broncos late. Their running back, Ashton Jeanty, had a really good game as expected. He's one of the top running backs, if not the best running back in college football. So a big effort by the Broncos. I think as long as Oregon is able to snap out of it and lives up to their expectations, I think Boise State has a really quality loss. And if they can run the table in the Mountain West, they are seriously I would say, favorite for making the college football playoff as a group of 5 team. The way they looked in that game, I think that should be the baseline expectation to run the table in the Mountain West. So big win for Boise State. Another couple teams, Oklahoma kind of struggled against Houston. Again, kind of a higher caliber of opponent like Boise State. And then as well, Alabama struggled against South Florida for most of that game. They were able to pull away late. The score does not reflect how close that game was for a while. Struggled at times. Jalen Milroe had a fumble right inside the Bulls' 10-yard line, and so they'll need to clean up some of those things. I think it's maybe a case of looking ahead to their Week 3 game at Wisconsin, which I think should be a very interesting game. It's kind of the only one in a pretty weak Week 3 slate. And I think on that point, though, week 2, I was talking about this actually today at church with a friend of mine. Shout out Richard if you're watching this video. I think week 2 is a situation where a lot of teams just fully prepare for that week 1 game. They give everything into that one game to make sure they start the season right. And then it's easy to kind of have a bit of a letdown in that week 2 game. Because, all your attention went to that week 1, you kind of give all your effort, and then you kind of have a little bit of maybe an emotional drop-off after week 1. Penn State kind of having that win over West Virginia, long delay and everything like that, might be an explanation for why they struggled against Bowling Green. So I think that's something to consider. One team that did not have that letdown, though, going into my next point, is the Texas Longhorns. They dismantled Michigan in Ann Arbor. It was a big 31-12 win for the Longhorns. Quinn Ewers had a really good game, 246 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Longhorns defense did a really good job against the Wolverines' offense. They held them to just 286 yards, which interestingly enough was exactly what Notre Dame totaled in their loss. And Davis Warren showed that he is still pretty young and inexperienced, throwing a couple of interceptions. One thing that was mentioned, I think, on the broadcast, it might have been by Joel Klatt, was that, when you're splitting snaps with that, like he was with Alex Orji, it's hard to really get into the offense as well. So I think that can be part of an explanation of why. And simply put, this Texas defense is really good. The Clemson transfer, Andrew Mukaba, played a really good game in the secondary. I think Malik Muhammad made a couple good plays as well. So Texas has a solid defense. They proved that against Michigan. I think they are the probably second team in the SEC to Georgia. That's what we expected going into the season. I think they proved that with this win. They showed that they are a true championship contender. Like their win at Alabama last year did, this shows that Texas is a serious contender, and with a 12-team playoff, even in a tougher SEC versus the Big 12 last year, they should be, I think, a shoo-in for the college football playoff. But I did say that about Notre Dame last week, so I guess, maybe there's not too much stock in that, but definitely the Longhorns looked good in week 2, and they've also began to create a really strong team culture over the last couple years under Steve Sarkisian. Couple other points. Clemson looked really good to bounce back to from the bad week 1 loss to a really good Georgia team. I think 66 points against App State. They exceeded my expectations. I thought the Mountaineers would keep things closer in that one, but the Tigers absolutely rolled them. Tennessee was dominant against NC State and Charlotte, 51-10. That's a big win for the Volunteers, and I think they're showing that they are a serious contender as well in the SEC and kind of that second tier. I think it's Georgia and Texas and maybe Ole Miss in that first tier, but then you've got that second tier where all those teams are going to be fighting for a college football playoff bid, and I think Tennessee, with a win over a solid NC State team, showed that they are definitely in that discussion. Iowa State gets a good win in their rivalry game over Iowa to claim the Cy-Hawk Trophy. Kyle Conradi nails a 54-yard field goal with, I think, under 15 seconds or around 15 seconds left in that one. They not only do they go into Kinnick Stadium and beat the Hawkeyes on their home turf, but they also take the Hawkeyes spot in the top 25, entering in at number 21. Another team that enters in is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They have looked really good, efficient, clean football these first 2 weeks. They get a big win in their rivalry over Colorado, a renewed rivalry the last 2 seasons. That's a big win. Colorado was not able to stop Nash Tutmacher, Ty Robinson, and the others in the Huskers pass rush. Shedeur Sanders was sacked, I think, 6 times, pressured a lot more than that. And he also kind of selfishly, I would say, called out his offensive line after the game. I understand that there is truth to that, but you do have to kind of back up your guys and stick up for them. So I don't think that was handled very well by Shedeur Sanders, and the Buffaloes are now going to be hoping to bounce back from that. The game went somewhat as I expected. I think Nebraska looked even a little bit better than I thought. Of course, Dylan Rail at quarterback. They did really well rushing the ball. I think Dante Dowdle had a couple touchdown runs. The Huskers team, I think, looks really good. They enter into the top 25 for the first time since 2019. They come in at number 23. Aside from that, my week 2 picks wasn't quite as good. I picked a few more games, and that proved to be kind of a mistake on my part. I picked some additional 3:30 games, just the result, not against the spread, and I got all 3 of those wrong. I'll pop up here my results. I went 8-6 this week, which brings my win-loss projections to 15-8 on the season. Against the spread, though, I will say I was pretty good. I was 9-2 this week, which brings me to 15-5 against the spread. So, done a pretty good job with getting the predictions right. Definitely some games here or there where maybe I should have taken a closer look. I mean, the ones that I kind of flippantly predicted last week were all wrong. So, looking forward to this next coming week of college football. Again, it's a little bit of a downer in terms of big marquee games. There might be a few in there that are kind of good matchups. Like, for example, Kansas and Illinois. Didn't even talk about that one. The Illini get a big win over the number 19 Jayhawks, and they were, I think, the first team out of the top 25. So Illinois could be an interesting team to watch, and I believe they play Nebraska. There might not be a whole lot of stakes in that game, but could be some eyeballs to keep on that one. But that's all for this Week 2 rundown of the college football action from this past week. I'm Peter Burtnett. This is College Football Talk. Thank you so much for sticking around to this point in the video. I am signing out. Peace.